The Atlantic stretched endlessly, dark and silent, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath. April 10th, 1912. The RMS Titanic, the grandest, most luxurious ship ever built, loomed at Southampton Dock. Passengers boarded with excitement and awe. The wealthy in glittering suits and flowing gowns, the hopeful immigrants clutching their few belongings, eyes wide with dreams of a new life. The ship was a palace afloat, sparkling chandeliers, polished wood, grand dining halls, wide promenades, and decks that reflected the moonlight like glass. Everyone called it Unsinkable. The engineers believed it, the captain believed it, the passengers believed it. But the Atlantic has a memory, and it never forgets. Beneath the grandeur, the ship's crew worked tirelessly. Engineers inspected engines, pipes, and pumps. Officers studied charts, noting ice warnings from other ships. Yet the excitement and luxury aboard distracted almost everyone. Families waved goodbye to Southampton, their laughter and chatter mingling with the soft hum of the engines. Children pressed their noses to the railings, fascinated by the endless black waters. The orchestra played on deck, cheerful tunes masking a subtle tension that only those who knew the sea could feel. The ship began to glide away, cutting through the water like a silver arrow, smooth and confident, unaware of the predator waiting ahead. Days passed. Life aboard Titanic seemed perfect, almost dreamlike. The wealthy dined on exquisite meals, drank champagne, and danced in the grand ballrooms. Immigrants shared stories of new beginnings, their eyes full of hope. But warnings persisted. Icebergs floated silently in the Atlantic. Messages from other ships came and went, yet none seemed urgent enough to cause alarm. The calm sea lulled everyone into a false sense of security. The ocean appeared tranquil, almost inviting, as if it had a secret to keep, a secret that would soon reveal itself with horrifying clarity. April 14th approached. The night air grew cold, sharp, and biting. Passengers strolled the decks, oblivious to the danger ahead. Crew members scanned the horizon, noting small chunks of ice drifting silently. The wind whispered over the water, carrying the faintest hint of danger. Then, almost imperceptibly, it appeared. Massive, looming, silent. An iceberg, a frozen mountain of death, waiting in the blackness. The lookout's cry shattered the night. "Iceberg ahead!" The Titanic tried to steer, but it was too late. A grinding, terrifying screech of metal against ice rang through the ship. The iceberg tore a gash in the hull. Water began flooding the forward compartments. Passengers felt a subtle tremor first, a strange vibration beneath their feet. Some thought it was normal. Others froze, sensing something terrible. The tremor intensified, doors banged, water splashed. The ship shuddered violently. Panic whispered, then roared. Women screamed, clutching children. Men shouted, trying to maintain order, while others froze in disbelief. Jewelry glinted in the dim light, cocktails spilled, laughter died. The orchestra continued playing, haunting melodies echoing in the corridors, a desperate attempt to comfort, to maintain calm. But the music clashed with chaos and fear. Crew tried to organize lifeboats, but lifeboats were too few. The order of women and children first meant many lifeboats left half empty. Families were torn apart. Some men refused to leave without their loved ones. Others helped strangers climb aboard. The Atlantic wind sliced through gowns and coats, carrying screams, prayers, and the stench of salt and fear. Below decks, water rose rapidly. Pumps labored, crew shouted, orders rang out, but the flood was relentless. The Titanic tilted slightly at first, then faster. Passengers clung to railings, furniture, anything to avoid sliding toward the icy abyss. Children cried, parents shouted, strangers became allies in desperation. The ship's massive structure groaned, metal and wood protesting the impossible weight of water filling its compartments. Every second felt like a lifetime, every heartbeat a gamble between life and death. Captain Edward Smith remained on the bridge, calm, commanding, issuing orders. He watched as the forward decks sank slowly into the Atlantic, the stern rising impossibly high above the sea. Officers and crew fought to save lives, some jumping into freezing waters to help others. The ship had been called Unsinkable, but every structure, every claim, was being swallowed by the cold, merciless ocean. The night was filled with screams, prayers, crashing metal, and the desperate shouts of human souls struggling against fate. The Titanic trembled violently as the water surged relentlessly into the forward compartments. The cold Atlantic rushed in, faster and stronger than anyone could have imagined. Passengers clung desperately to anything they could hold. Railings, furniture, each other. Panic spread like wildfire. Mothers shielded children, some whispering prayers, some screaming. Fathers shouted orders they hoped would be heard over the chaos. The screams of hundreds intertwined with the haunting melodies of the orchestra, still playing bravely, almost defiantly, against the roar of rushing water and breaking wood. The lifeboats were lowered hastily, some swung wildly, threatening to crush those climbing aboard. The order of women and children first was obeyed, but confusion reigned. Many lifeboats left half empty, their wooden hulls floating on the icy water, carrying a handful of the terrified while leaving hundreds behind. Families were torn apart in moments. Strangers held each other, forming fragile alliances in the midst of unimaginable terror. The frigid wind whipped across the decks, carrying screams, cries, and prayers into the night. Below decks, the flooding became catastrophic. Water poured into the lower compartments, sweeping everything in its path. Crew members fought desperately, trying to keep the pumps working, but the ocean was stronger. Engineers, drenched and exhausted, ignored the cold and fatigue, trying to hold back the inevitable. The ship groaned under the pressure, steel twisting, rivets popping. Every second felt like an eternity, and every heartbeat was a gamble between survival and death. Some passengers refused to believe the disaster. They clutched champagne glasses, jewelry, and memories, hoping the unsinkable ship would somehow remain afloat. Others had the stark realization that death was only moments away. Children wailed, couples clung together, and the wealthy and poor alike found themselves equal in fear, helpless against the immense power of the sea. As the Titanic tilted more steeply, the bow sank lower, disappearing beneath the icy waters. The stern rose impossibly high, exposing the ship's underbelly to the cold night air. Wooden panels cracked, metal twisted, and the great vessel shuddered violently. People clung desperately, some leaping into the freezing Atlantic, hoping for survival, knowing that death could come with a single wrong movement. The screams of the living and the final cries of the doomed filled the night, mixing with the relentless roar of the sea. Captain Edward Smith remained calm, issuing orders, guiding crew, and comforting passengers in his final moments. Officers helped women and children into lifeboats, shouting instructions, risking their own lives. The grandeur of Titanic, the pride of human engineering, crumbled as water devoured the bow. The ship's immense size offered no mercy. The night became a stage of horror and heroism intertwined. Every act, every decision, every desperate attempt to survive carried the weight of life and death. Some tried to climb floating debris, shivering violently, their teeth chattering in the freezing cold. Others were swept away by sudden waves. The water stole breath, strength, and hope. Yet some refused to give up. Lifeboats drifted in the black ocean, carrying the lucky few, while thousands struggled in the dark waters, fighting a losing battle against nature itself. The night of April 14th, 1912, became a blur of terror and courage. Titanic, once the pinnacle of human achievement, was now a battlefield of survival. Every scream, every prayer, every desperate attempt to stay alive painted a chilling picture of human frailty. The Atlantic, silent and relentless, claimed thousands that night, leaving only the echoes of heroism, fear, and tragedy in the hearts of those who survived. The Titanic's bow plunged deeper into the icy Atlantic, water gushing relentlessly into every forward compartment. The stern rose impossibly high, groaning and creaking under the unbearable weight of its own collapse. The ship, once hailed as Unsinkable, was now a twisted, trembling monument to human pride and folly. Every metal plate and wooden beam screamed as the structure began to fail. Passengers clung desperately to railings, furniture, and each other. Some scrambled toward lifeboats, slipping on wet decks, hands grasping for anything solid. Others were thrown into the freezing water by sudden tilts and violent jolts. The night was filled with screaming, prayers, and the cracking sounds of metal giving way. The orchestra played their final haunting melodies, a ghostly soundtrack to the horror unfolding around them. Captain Edward Smith remained at his post, calm yet resolute, issuing orders to save as many as possible. Crew members risked their lives repeatedly, guiding passengers into lifeboats, helping children and women climb aboard, even as waves crashed violently across the decks. The Titanic split completely in two, the bow swallowed by the frigid waters while the stern lifted impossibly before finally succumbing to gravity and collapse. Water surged through the open deck, sweeping anyone in its path into the freezing Atlantic. Some passengers leapt into the water, hoping desperately to survive. Others clung to floating debris, shivering violently, their breath stolen by the icy waves. Screams of the doomed and cries of the desperate echoed through the dark night, mingling with the roaring Atlantic. Men, women, and children struggled against the freezing water, some praying, some sobbing, some fighting for life with every ounce of strength. Survival seemed impossible, yet a few held on with stubborn determination. The lifeboats drifted into the darkness, carrying a handful of the lucky. Others were left to float on debris or swim frantically in the freezing water. Some tried to keep each other afloat, forming temporary bonds that would last only as long as the night. The icy ocean was merciless, claiming thousands in moments, while the few survivors clung to life with disbelief and horror. The sheer scale of the disaster was unimaginable. Titanic's collapse was total. The once magnificent ship was reduced to fragments, groaning and creaking as it sank. Above, the lifeboats carried witnesses of an apocalypse at sea. Many survivors were in shock, unable to comprehend the loss, unable to stop the images of terror, bravery, and death from haunting them. Each second stretched into an eternity, every heartbeat a struggle against the icy grasp of the Atlantic. By dawn, the water had calmed slightly, but the devastation remained. Only fragments of the Titanic floated. Thousands were gone, swallowed by the ocean. The survivors huddled in lifeboats, shaking from cold and shock, staring at the remnants of the ship that had promised them safety. Every plank, every beam, every frozen wave carried the story of courage, tragedy, and human fragility. Titanic, the marvel of human engineering, had been defeated by the relentless power of nature. As dawn broke over the icy Atlantic, a pale, cold light revealed the full scale of the disaster. Lifeboats floated in the calm water, carrying the few survivors who had clung desperately through the night. Shivering and exhausted, they stared at the remnants of the Titanic, now a ghostly silhouette of splintered wood and twisted metal, slowly disappearing beneath the waves. Every plank, every beam, every piece of debris seemed to whisper the stories of those who had fought valiantly for their lives. Nearby, the RMS Carpathia, responding to Titanic's distress signals, arrived on the scene. Crew and passengers worked tirelessly, pulling the survivors from the water and lifeboats. Each rescued soul was a miracle, a testament to human resilience and courage. The survivors huddled together, their bodies trembling, hearts pounding, and minds haunted by what they had witnessed. Mothers held children close, strangers offered comfort, and tears flowed freely. Grief, relief, and disbelief mingled in the freezing morning air. News of the disaster spread rapidly. Families across the world waited anxiously for word of loved ones. Newspapers called it the disaster of the century. Survivors recounted tales of bravery, heroism, and unimaginable tragedy. The musicians who had played until the very end became legends. Passengers who gave their lifeboat seats to others were immortalized as heroes. Every story of that night became a lesson in courage, selflessness, and the fragility of life. Though thousands were lost, the Titanic's legacy endured. Its sinking exposed the limits of human engineering and hubris, but also inspired reforms in maritime safety, lifeboat regulations, and emergency preparedness. The survivors carried their experiences for the rest of their lives, telling the world that even in the face of overwhelming disaster, humanity's spirit could survive. The Titanic itself became more than a ship. It became a legend, a symbol of dreams, ambition, tragedy, and resilience. Its story echoes across oceans and generations, a reminder that even the mightiest can fall, yet courage, heroism, and hope can rise from the depths of despair. From the terror-filled night when the Unsinkable sank, to the heroism of those who risked everything to save others, to the survival against all odds. The Titanic's final hours became an enduring testament to the strength and spirit of humanity. The icy Atlantic had claimed a ship, but it could never drown the courage, the stories, and the memories of those who lived through the night.